Hello, this is Leonard Davis, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Seamore Beek, a longtime resident of Newport Beach from a rather historical family. And here he is. Seymour, mind if I call you by your first name?
It's actually, Seymour is my middle name.
Oh, it is.
I am properly Henry Seamore Beek III.
Henry Seamore Beek III.
And for reasons unknown to me, all my life I've been Seymour.
Okay. Well, anyway, so we're in your lovely home here, and we can see more out of this window than you can in most houses in Newport Beach. Right across the way is the pavilion, and you can keep an eye on the ferry boats going by. And so I guess tell me about your family. You were born here in Newport Beach, I imagine.
Well, my parents lived here when I was born. They actually lived in this house.
Okay.
And I was born in 1933.
Okay.
And there weren't any hospitals in Newport Beach. And my parents selected Loma Linda Hospital.
Oh.
So I was born at Loma Linda.
Okay, but then you moved down here.
But they lived here the whole time.
Now, your dad was that Joseph Beek or?
My dad was Joseph Beek.
Okay, so son of Joseph. So he's the one that started the ferry service. So tell me about your dad and the beginning of the
my dad was a transplant from the East Coast. Mm-hmm. He was born in Maine, and he lived in Maine until I think his father died when he was about 13. Mm-hmm. And the family wasn't very well off, and they had to split off. He went to one set of relatives, and his mother and his sister went to another set of relatives, and they didn't get back together for a few years. And in the meantime, they ended up in Denver, and he spent quite a few years in Denver and nearby Colorado Springs. And then he got various jobs. One job he worked for the Government Reclamation Service in Arizona, building a dam up on the Salt River, and then
always heading west.
Always heading west.
Okay.
And then some of his relatives, by this time he's in his 20s, mid-20s, and some of his relatives in Pasadena were pretty well off, and they invited him to come to live with them and finish school, which he did. And he finished high school at what's now Caltech. It was Troop Institute in those days, which was a high school and a college. and then he started coming down here and met Mr. Collins, who is the developer of Balboa Island.
Okay, do you know what year he came to Newport, first of all?
I think his first trip here was in 1907, but he didn't move here until later, about 1912 or 13, I think. He actually moved here.
And then he knew Mr.
Well, Mr. Collins gave him a job as a real estate salesman.
Okay.
Actually, his first job was helping Collins build a bridge onto the island. He was a carpenter. Okay. And after that, he began helping Mr. Collins sell lots. And
what was the price of the lots back then, do you recall?
I think the inside lots were $50, the bayfront lots were $100 or $200, something like that.
I wouldn't even buy a doghouse today.
And
that's just incredible.
So anyway, he did that, and he also built boats. He bought the Island Boathouse, which was at the corner of Agate and the South Bayfront, right where our ferry offices are now.
Okay. And what was the name of the place?
Island Boathouse.
Island Boathouse.
Big sort of a barn of a structure.
Okay.
And
at Agate and
South Bayfront. And his office was in the Island Boathouse, the real estate office. And then he built boats in the back of the building, which was a big sort of a shop. That building later got moved 2 doors to the west, and it burned down in a big fire in 1953. Anyway, he had no idea he was going to run a ferry boat. He wanted to sell real estate and build boats, and then the opportunity came along to run the ferry, which was pretty small time in those days. I mean, there were very few houses on the island, so the demand for ferry service was very, very low, especially in the winter. And so he took over the ferry service, which had actually been operating before, but was kind of unreliable. And he took it over with an 18-foot outboard-powered rowboat. And that was his first ferry boat.
Okay, 18-foot.
And that was in 1919. We just celebrated the 100th anniversary a year and a half ago of the 100th.
I don't suppose that boat still exists, does it?
We don't own it. If it still exists, I'd be very surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I was wondering if it was in a museum or something. It should be, but
so.
it could be. But
it
could be in our museum if we had a big enough one and had the boat.
But he almost immediately got hold of another boat and adapted that to be a ferry boat. And it was also just a passenger boat called the Islander. And then he built a 20-foot self-propelled inboard ferry boat that held 20 people. And that was called the Fat Ferry. And that was it was still around when I was a kid. It wasn't operating.
Did that hold cars?
It did not handle cars.
Okay, so also passengers.
They would take a car across by a special arrangement. They had to load the car on a barge,
okay,
take it across the bay, and I think they charged some outlandish price like $5 to take a car across. But then in 1922, he built a double-ended, self-propelled, two-car ferry that operates the way the ferry boats do. It goes both directions. And that's really when auto service started with that boat. That was called the Joker.
The Joker, yeah. I think I remember that name.
We have pictures of the Joker. We have pictures of all those boats, actually.
Okay, and then when did they build the current ferries?
All three of the ones that we have now were all built in the 1950s.
Okay. And so the built in 22 serviced until the 50s, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, actually, no. There was another boat built in 1930, which was in service until the 50s. And actually, the 1922 boat was rebuilt and lengthened, and it was in service until the 1920s, 1950s.
So they ran both of those boats then?
Yeah.
What was the name of the other boat, do you know?
The Commodore.
The 1930 boat?
The 1930 boat was the Commodore,
okay,
and it was a three-car ferry, very similar to what we now operate.
There's one now called the Commodore.
There is one now called the Commodore.
A couple of other ones.
There's
the Captain and the Commodore and the Admiral. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But they've all had extensive modifications made to them. They've been refastened and redecked and re-engined numbers of times, and they've got fancy hydraulic steering now and very modern engines. And
okay, so this house. So did you guys live in other houses on the island, or?
Well, my parents, from the time they built this house, they lived here.
Okay.
Until each of them died.
And so you said they built it in 1922.
And I lived here until. It's embarrassing to say this, but I lived here until I was 24 years old and got married. Except when I was away at college. I was away at college for 4 years.
Hey, I lived in my house till I was 24, and I got my mom married off and out of there, and I'm still there. So, okay, so they built the house in 1922. So you didn't have other properties to live in at the island at all, or?
No, I never lived anywhere else. My dad had a number of other properties on the island and other places around town.
But you only lived here.
And he went on with his real estate development business. He developed Harbor Island, and he developed Beacon Bay, and a couple of tracts up in the vicinity of Newport Harbor High School. And I do not remember if those tracts had names or not. And then he moved his operations to Northern California, and he developed a couple of lovely residential communities out near Roseville. One of them called Hidden Valley, the other called Lakeview Hills.
But he didn't move up there, did he?
He was up there a lot.
Yeah.
But family never moved up there.
Yeah. That was smart, staying here.
I was up there quite a bit.
Yeah.
On
so
spring break and the summer and stuff, I got drafted to go up there and do some work.
So you grew up here. I imagine you probably attended Harbor High School and Newport L, or?
I attended what we called then Newport Beach Grammar School, which is now called Newport L.
It still has
the only grade school in town.
And so you went there till 8th grade.
Newport Harbor was the only high school for many miles around. And Newport L went through the 8th grade.
Yeah, well, it still says Newport Beach Grammar School on the front, so they've kept the sign. Right. So, what class did you graduate then from Harbor? Must have been
from Harbor. I graduated in 51.
51, okay. So I'm 71, so.
And that was the first year that Newport Harbor broke 1,000. 1,000 students. It was 1951.
Okay.
Got to 1,000. And there was no Costa Mesa High School, no Estancia,
Yeah.
no Irvine schools, one Huntington Beach High School. You know, gives you an idea of the
And
population then.
did you go to college locally, or?
Yeah, I went to Pomona College in Claremont.
Okay. And then you came back to Newport.
I got a job working in the aerospace business. I went to work for Douglas Aircraft in Long Beach, and I moved back here.
So who was running the ferry then?
Various people.
Okay. So
There was my dad had a longtime manager named Evan Jones,
okay.
who ran the ferry business for probably 30 years. We always had, until fairly recently, we always had somebody who was a general manager at the ferry who really did everything.
So, so tell me more about the ferry. Do you know like how many cars go across every day on an average, or?
On a good day, 1,000 cars.
Wow. That's
And,
pretty good. Yeah.
you know, 300,000 or 400,000 cars a year.
You know what I do is when people come from out of town to visit, you drive around town, and one of the things you got to do is take them on the ferry because
Sure.
that's just something that
And we
is
take
very
about,
unique.
about 2.5 million foot passengers or passengers a year.
2.5 million a year. Wow.
That's a lot different than it was in 1919.
How many a year did you have then? Do you know?
I have no idea, but it was probably a couple of hundred.
Okay. All right. So, so your dad helped develop Harbor Island and Beacon
He
Bay.
did. He was
Yeah.
the developer.
Okay,
of
the
both of
developer.
them,
And so he didn't have anything to do with that area that with the little inlet now that wasn't there before.
Promontory.
Yeah.
Well, that
Yeah.
wasn't until the 70s. That
Yeah,
was
so
early
he-
70s that that was dredged out.
He was gone by then, so I guess.
Well, that was all just
Yeah.
beach sand and
Yeah, I remember when they did
and
that.
sagebrush until
So you have how many siblings?
I have two brothers.
Two brothers.
Yeah,
and,
both older.
And
One's still living.
what are their names?
Barton and Alan.
Yeah, Barton and Alan. I've met Alan before.
And
Now he spells it Allan.
Allan.
Okay. And then I went to school with Charles and Carol.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I remember her and I remember him, and I ran into him one day about 3 years ago. But whose kids are they?
Well, that's Barton's two oldest.
Okay.
Chuck is his oldest. Chuck
Okay.
lives here in town.
Okay.
Carol lives in Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are other members of the family involved in the ferry business at all, or?
Well, Alan is the vice president,
Okay.
and so he's involved somewhat
And
on the board of directors.
okay, but the day-to-day operations are done by the people that are.
Well, I have three departments,
Yeah. Okay.
and I'm very good at delegating.
Okay.
My three departments are the office manager and the maintenance guy and the operations guy. And the operations guy is the one that worries about the operation of the boats and who's working when and all that kind of thing. And the maintenance guy does what you'd expect, maintains everything with his crew.
Well, that sounds good. Any other things that you're involved with in town, with regard either to the ferry or any other operational things or committees or whatever?
I was on the original Harbor Commission. And we formed the Harbor Commission, I think it was in '02. And I was one of the ones that was helping to convince the city council that we should have a Harbor Commission. Because up until that time, the harbor was managed by a couple of guys that were on the city staff that worked for the city manager, and there was really no place for citizen input the way there is with a commission. And we thought that it really should be a job like the Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Commission or the Planning Commission or something like that. So we convinced the city there should be a harbor commission. So then in return for that, they made me a harbor commissioner for 7 years.
Be careful what you suggest people.
Yeah, be careful what you ask
so
for.
7 years you were the chairman. Okay.
And I served on various other little committees and things around town, and I've been very active in yacht clubs and yachting. And,
Which yacht clubs are you in?
well, I started out with the Balboa Island Yacht Club, which is a junior yacht club,
Yeah.
kids 4 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I was Commodore of that. And I was a member of the Balboa Yacht Club also, and then I became a member of the Newport Harbor Yacht Club, and then I got active and had various posts. I was the fleet captain and race committee chairman, and then I went to the chairs. I became rear Commodore, vice Commodore, and Commodore.
So you were the Commodore?
I was, 1986.
1986 was Commodore, yeah. So I've probably seen your picture on the wall in there.
And then I got involved with the Association of Orange Coast Yacht Clubs after that,
Okay.
and I became Commodore of that a few years later.
Okay, and then so now your dad was he was like the
My dad did so many
harbor
things.
commissioner or something like that.
He did so many things.
Or he was a harbor master. That's the title.
He was sort of a self-appointed harbor master
Yeah.
at one point, but I think the city acknowledged that he was the harbor master. I don't know if he got paid anything or not, but his main job as harbor master was to go down and tow people off the bar that got stuck in the bar at the harbor entrance. I don't mean a bar where you drink whiskey.
Yeah, no,
I mean a sandbar.
Yeah, I know. That was a dangerous place.
The harbor, had a breakwater at that point, but the sand kept shifting around, and it was very hard for strangers to find their way in and out of the harbor, and people got stuck in the bar quite regularly.
People got
That was
killed
one of my
there.
dad's jobs, was to go tow them off.
People got killed there a couple of times
A couple
too.
of people drowned. It was almost a year. I think my dad told me that somebody drowned down there every year for a long time.
Yeah.
A dangerous place.
So
he did that.
So you were.
He sold real estate and he ran the ferry business, and then at some point, I think about 1918 or 19, he went to work in Sacramento in the legislature. The legislature needed clerks and people, and the legislature was a seasonal business in those days. It didn't operate year-round. It operated in the winter every other year.
He was a clerk, not.
It had a session every other year.
He was a clerk.
So he started out as a clerk, and then he became the secretary of the Senate.
Okay.
And they had that job for over 50 years.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
And it became more and more time-consuming. In the beginning, it did, it was a few weeks here and there, but in the end, it was almost a full-time job because the legislature's in session all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had to be up there for that. So he's a busy guy.
So did you see much of him?
Well, it was always great when he showed up.
Yeah.
He'd show up and he'd say, "Okay, son, here's what we're going to do." I had to drop everything and do things with him.
So aside from, do you still boat actively or?
I do.
Okay.
Well, not as actively as I used to, but I still have several boats.
And sailboat mostly, or?
I have a lacer, which I sail occasionally, and a couple of small power boats. My dad built a lovely cruiser in 1962 called Vamos, V-A-M-O-S, and that was in the family until 2 years ago when it just got so old it was too much of a burden, and we donated it to a foundation. But that boat was part of the family for a long time. Well,
So laser, that's big on lead. I guess you probably knew Roy Woolsey back in the day.
I knew Roy Woolsey quite well.
Yeah, and because he was sailing well into his 80s.
He represented us in legal action one time, and also I know him through sailing. He's a great guy.
Yeah. He did legal work for my mom too. So, okay, so obviously you made many trips out to Catalina and all those places.
Probably
Remember the
hundreds.
Catalina Yacht Club by any chance?
I wasn't.
Oh, okay. Okay, so besides boating, what else do you think is fun to do here in Newport Beach?
Well, as a kid, this was a great place to grow up because there weren't much restrictions on anything. You know, you could go over and build a fire on the beach anywhere you wanted, anytime, and nobody cared. And we used to ride our bikes up in the back bay, and we used to ride our bikes up onto the Irvine Ranch, which of course we weren't supposed to do, but we very seldom got caught. And we did get caught. The cowboys would run us down with their horses, scared us to death, and they scared us and intimidated us and kicked us out. But there weren't very many cowboys, and they didn't come around very often. So we had a lot of fun up there.
Did you spend any time on what was then Shark Island?
Did. Went to Shark Island. Before there was a bridge over to it, the channel went all the way around, and we could sail all the way around the island. And trying to think of some other questions here. So what do you worry about for Newport's future more than anything else? Well, I guess I worry most about the overcrowding and congestion, and which seems to be getting steadily worse. Now, I used to complain as recently as, say, 25 years ago. I used to complain that the bay was a beautiful body of water and it was just underutilized. There weren't enough people using the bay. I can remember saying that, which was true in the winter. In the summer, the bay always got utilized a lot, but in the winter, you'd look out, you wouldn't see anything. Well, that's not true anymore. Now they're stand-up paddleboarders and kayakers and rented duffies, and there's stuff all over the bay almost every day of the year. And it's a little, congestion's a little worrisome at times on the bay. And the congestion other places like the oceanfront boardwalk, that is a dangerous place, and something's got to be done about that. More enforcement, or
Do you think they should widen it, maybe?
Or a parallel boardwalk for bicycles only, or something like that.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Because it's if you go over there on a weekend, it is, you can just there's no enforcement, and there's all kinds of motorized vehicles using it, which shouldn't be, and these big pedal things, I think they call them surreys, that aren't supposed to be there, but they are, and that's a bad situation. And of course, traffic around here, God, it can take forever to get on off Balboa Island at times. It can take forever to get down the peninsula.
So I got an early start getting here.
Those are the things that I find most troublesome.
Going back to the ferry service, I guess one of the questions somebody had was, have you worried about employees stealing the money? Because I mean, you could get 50 people going to get on the ferry, and I'm collecting the money, and I could put half the dollars in my pocket and half in the cash register, and how would they know the difference? And have you had a problem with that?
Going back in history, I really can't answer the question for everything in the past, but in the present time, we have video cameras all over the place.
Okay.
And we also monitor, with the aid of the video cameras, we can monitor what each employee does, and we know how much money he should have collected, because we can count the people and count the cars, and so we're right on top of it, and they know we're right on top of it. So, somebody could probably steal $1 here and there and get away with it, but they couldn't steal a lot and get away with it.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. You can just edit it out, I guess. Huh?
Yeah.
What's the
Just
question?
wondering if you've had much problem, you caught many people, and had much problem with it,
With what?
with the collections? Did you find anybody through the cameras?
Oh, yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we have fired a number of people for that. Not a whole lot. I think, fortunately, most people are basically honest. That's the truth of the matter. So it's unusual. We have a problem like that. One thing we have had lately, though, which is really disturbing, we've had a lot of counterfeit bills passed. We stopped taking $100 bills because it's just too expensive to take a counterfeit $100 bill to the bank, and they say, can't take this. And some of them are very sophisticated. Some of them we don't detect. They go to the bank, and of course they go through some kind of special magic machine at the bank that looks for watermarks and different things, and some of them have been caught that way. They've been very, very well done. And of course, the bank immediately turns them over to the FBI.
But you guys don't take those
Well,
anymore.
our people are getting better and better at detecting the counterfeits, but people counterfeit even bills as small as 5s and 10s. It's really weird. You wouldn't think somebody would take the risk going to federal penitentiary for $5, but they do.
So how many does your brother still, Alan still lives in Newport Beach?
Yes, he does.
And the other brother, did you have any sisters at all? Or?
My other brother passed away about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
No sisters.
So just 3 of these.
I got 5 kids.
Yeah. Do they still live in town?
One of my sons lives in town, and he runs our fuel dock, Island Marine Fuel.
Okay, all right.
And he's quite active around town. He was
What's his name?
David.
David.
He's on the board at the Chamber of Commerce, and he was Commodore of the Balboa Yacht Club last year. And he's on the board of the Visit Newport. Our
Okay.
Visit Newport is what used to be called the convention. What is it? Hotel and Convention or something like that. Anyway, it's called Visit Newport now.
So there will be Beeks in town for a long time to come.
I suspect. My other kids are spread out. I have a son that lives in Mill Valley and a son that lives in Washington. My daughter lives here, though, and she's a practicing attorney.
The sensible ones stayed in town.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much. I've learned a lot from your interview, and we enjoyed talking to you, and a lot of good information. And
well, it's
thank you
been a
very much.
pleasure.
And once again, this is
And
Seamore. This is Seamore Beek, a longtime Newport resident.
As an overall observation, that Newport Beach not only was a great place to grow up when it was a small town, but it's a great place to live now
Yeah,
when it's a big town.
I agree. That's why I still live here too. So. All right, thank you.